Good morning. Good morning. So over here, we're dealing with, in chapter 28, continuing the theme of avoiding sadness. As chapter 26 and chapter 27 was saying different tricks of the Yetzer, of the animal soul, of the evil inclination, of trying to get you to sink, trying to get you to go through its vicious cycle of sadness and depression, of guilt, of shame, whatever mechanism it could come up with. Over here, we're talking about more of a specific case of a feeling that's plaguing you specifically during the times of prayer, during the times of Torah study, when you're fully immersed in a spiritual height. And at that point, these negative feelings or inappropriate thoughts are throwing and are bogging your mind and flooding your heart. That brings you to a state of feeling disgust. Look, my prayer is worthless. Look what really is going on inside of me. And the way we, one of the main things we were saying is, if we had one soul, and just to rephrase one thing, there's people of the world say, look, the person praying is worthless for his prayer because of what's happening and what it leads to, his inappropriate thoughts, etc. So the Alter Rebbe says that would be true if we're dealing with one soul. If it's one soul that sometimes has good thoughts and sometimes has bad thoughts, and when you're in time of prayer, the bad thoughts are actually what's taking over, maybe you're right. But the truth is we have two souls. We have a godly soul that has a equal counterpart that is trying to tango. And whenever the godly soul is feeling high, feeling strong, feeling empowered, like during time of prayer, what happens is the animal soul needs to fight back and gets an extra adrenaline to push back, to not lose out, not to fall too far away. So the struggle going on during prayer is actually a proof of how worthy your prayer really is, meaning how much it's working, that the animal soul is feeling weakened. The animal soul is feeling knocked out. So therefore, it's going to try to push back. That was, I think, the main point. I'm going to be backtracking a little bit. First of all, I'm looking in the book now. I'll pull up the Kindle on the screen in a moment. But I'm looking at the book on 320. There's a Hasidic thought that it looks like I missed. I didn't read last week, so I'll be reading that. I'll be starting there. 320. There's no need to follow along inside. You could also just listen as I share it. It's 2 paragraphs long, and hopefully you'll just initiate the teaching of the day with the Tanya, a thought in Hasidus, a thought in Hasidic terminology. Okay, so it goes like this. An inappropriate thought is a sign. Whoops, hold on, someone else is joining. An inappropriate thought is a sign of your success in prayer. So it should spark joy. When your animal soul saw that it was losing the competition for your attention, it felt the need to fight back. And so it threw you the thought. It throws it your way to try to throw a wrench and to try to trip you up. Instead of getting depressed, that however hard you try to concentrate, you cannot rid yourself of inappropriate thoughts. Say to yourself, wow, I was praying with such devotion that my animal soul felt really threatened, and therefore tried to do something about it. I must be doing really well. What a beautiful, it's the same prayer, but a whole different thought and attitude, that when you have an inappropriate thought, you shouldn't celebrate the inappropriate thought, because that you have to throw away, of course. We're talking about a Beinoni here. But don't get depressed over the fact that my prayer is unworthy. On the contrary, the fact that you're having this inappropriate thought is the animal soul feeling threatened and feeling weakened, and therefore is trying to push back, trying to make its way back in the rink, and therefore throwing an inappropriate thought your way to try to derail you. But the truth is, it's because my prayer is actually so powerful. My prayer is so worthy. I'm doing really well. I really enjoy that. I'll say one other thing. It's pretty cool, actually. Just I may have mentioned before that in general throughout the year, we actually divide the Tanya into small sections, a few lines, maybe 10, 15 lines a day. And the goal is to actually finish the Tanya in a year. We're not doing it that way. We're going obviously just chapter by chapter at our own pace. But there is a goal of people that try to finish the Tanya throughout the year. It's called part of Chitas, which is an abbreviation. A Chitas is made up of 3 Hebrew letters: a Ches, a Taf, and a Taf. Chitas, and it stands for Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya. And the goal is that every day of the week we study a section of the Chumash, of that week's Torah portion, the Aliyah, the section of that day. We study a section of the Tanya, and the goal is to finish it throughout the cycle of the year. So we finish the Chumash, the Torah, through the year. And then we also finish the Tanya. If we do a few, around 10, 15 lines a day, we finish the Tanya every year. And then we also do Tehillim. The Tehillim has 150 chapters. We say a few chapters a day. That's divided accordingly. And we end up finishing the Tehillim, the book of Psalms by David, throughout the span of a month. So what I'm trying to get to is that where we're holding in chapter 28 of Tanya, we're actually just coinciding with where the yearly cycle of Tanya is holding in their study. So if you're looking in the book on 321, you'll see the section that we're in the middle of is on the 27th of Shvat on a regular year. Today is the 28th of Shvat. So today's study will take us literally through the segue through what literally tens of thousands of people are studying through the world, today's Tanya of the day. Okay, having said that, we'll go inside. I'll be pulling the Kindle onto the page, so no need to have the book in front of you. Of course, if you have a book, you could study with that, or you could also just study by way of the Kindle. So here we go. I'll throw it up. And good morning, Shira. I'm seeing you now. Hello there. I didn't see you before. And good morning, Ron. Ron Litvin is joining us as well. So that's really exciting. I should make a Shachianu. Good to see you, Ron. Okay, so we'll share the screen. Here we go. Okay, I hope everyone could see. I'm just going to backtrack one page just to get us back in the throw. Actually, literally just at the top of the page in the Kindle. And on 321 towards the bottom, if you're looking in the book. What we're in the middle of is don't get tripped up, don't get saddened on the fact that thoughts that are not godly are coming up during prayer, thoughts that are inappropriate, thoughts that are distractive. You should actually realize that you have 2 souls. So this is normal. We have one soul that's getting strengthened during prayer. So the other soul is feeling a little bit of an adrenaline before getting knocked out, before getting KO'd. So let's just continue inside. But in actual fact, you have 2 souls competing with each other in your brain. The desire and will of each one being to control you, to fill your mind exclusively with its influence. Like we explained in the past, both souls want the keys to the driver's seat, want to be able to steer the car, your body, your thought, speech, and action in its direction, where it wants to go. So it's trying to influence you. You have 2 souls trying to do that. So the presence of inappropriate thoughts does not reflect negatively on the devotion of your divine soul, since all your thoughts of Torah and fear of heaven come from your divine soul, whereas all the thoughts of worldly matters come from the animal soul. So you have 2 souls. All the thoughts that are Torah-worthy, godly, and about fear of heaven, that's obviously from the good, godly soul, the divine soul. And worldly things about mundane things, that's coming from the animal soul. So the 2 types of thought, appropriate or inappropriate, are like different voices in your head emanating from different places. If there was just one you, meaning there was just you, one soul, then a failure to concentrate all the time in prayer might be disappointing. But since you actually have 2 selves, an intense competition means that some real devotion is emanating from the higher you, and the lower you is fighting back. So this is just such a fundamental idea in Tanya, the concept that we actually have 2 souls, which we know already from chapter 1. But over here, you see where it's really taking action, where don't get tripped up on the fact that you're having inappropriate thoughts during prayer, because your prayer is coming from your divine soul. It's feeling high, it's feeling spiritual. But at the same time, the other soul wants to stay in the picture, wants to stay relevant, and therefore it's going to throw an inappropriate thought your way to get you to fight back and to get you distracted. So, but if you're 2 souls, Ron, it's beautiful to see your handsome face. Yeshikoach. It's nice to see you. But if your two souls have such different personalities, why do you feel like one person? Why don't you literally hear two voices in your head? There's only one me, but there should be two voices. There's two souls. So why do I only hear one voice? Why isn't there a split personality? A little bit of a schizophrenia here to feel double-sided every time, every day. Every thought should have two edges to it, two sides to it. So this is the really cool part. Only the divine soul is dressed in the animal soul. So this is going to be a fundamental idea that godly soul is dressed in the animal soul. The Nefesh HaElokit is enclosed, is dressing itself in the animal soul. Let's see what that means. The divine soul does not have direct access to the body because it's divine. The body is physical. So therefore, it acts via the medium of the animal soul into which it must dress. See page 39. Therefore, your consciousness is uniform and you do not sense the presence of two souls because the only way your divine soul connects in you, it's a soul, but it's so divine that how does it communicate with you? It communicates via the animal soul. So it dresses, it encloses itself in the animal soul. So therefore, your consciousness is going to be one-directed. It doesn't present itself as two souls. So even though, of course, you do have two souls, which means, and just by the way, over and over again, when I say two souls, the Hebrew word is a nefesh ha'elokit or a nefesh habahamit, godly soul or animal soul. The word for nefesh, which we've been translating as soul, you could also just substitute that for a different word. Just substitute it for a drive. You have a godly drive. You're driven to godly things, to Torah, to mitzvahs, etc. You're driven to animalistic things, to selfish things. So that drive, the godly drive that you have, how does it communicate with you? Only through the animal soul. And therefore, while you do have two souls, there's only one voice that's coming. It's enclosing itself in your mind only as one, a uniform. So we're not yet done on that. So he's going to give an example because we're going to have pushback. Because till now, for literally 27 and a half chapters, we've been studying two souls, two voices, and now we're saying it's really enclosing itself. So let's get a bigger idea, and we'll try to make sense out of it together. So I just turned the page in the Kindle, so I'm at the top. But the Tanya teaches your metaphysical constitution is fundamentally split between two energies, radically altering the significance of a lack of concentration in prayer. So let's see that inside. I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that last line. Your metaphysical constitution, I'm just reading that paragraph again, it seemed heavy. Your metaphysical constitution is fundamentally split between two energies. Okay, so and that will translate in how we view the concentration or the lack of concentration in prayer. Let's see that inside. Oops. The situation is comparable to the case of a man praying with concentration and a nasty heathen stands next to him and tries to distract him by talking and mouthing off at him. That's such a cool expression. I just have to pause everyone for a second. I don't know if I mentioned the story last week, but just with the schedule of my kids and carpool in the morning, I find myself with one of my children before dropping her off at Gittel's preschool, which is in the Santa Margarita, Terra Linda area next to Scotty's Market. So in the morning, I have to drop her off at 9, but I'm in the area because I have to drop my boys off a little earlier. So I actually use that as an opportunity to do a prayer, literally by the Terra Linda mountain. I don't know what the name of the mountain is, but literally by the mountain, I just go right next to the trail and with my daughter, and we do a beautiful prayer. Like we do my shacharit. I wear my talis and my tefillin, and I'm making sure I'm not in anyone's way. It's actually been very quiet, maybe because it's winter and COVID. It's been gorgeous. So one days there is it's a garbage day. in that area. I don't know, Ron, if your area also, if Wednesday's garbage day, but in this Terralinda area, it's Wednesday morning is garbage day. So I make sure I'm to the side, and the garbage truck comes, and it's loud, of course, but I'm more on the mountain, so I'm not blocking anyone. But it's so cool. The garbage truck guy, I'm trying to pray, and the garbage truck is not the exact thing that you want in front of your prayer. It's not like the most scenic and spiritual view and smell. But he gets out of his truck today, and I've been praying there for a few weeks already. So he doesn't know me. I don't know him. He actually, it sounded like he had a Persian Iranian accent. He seemed Arabic, but he comes over to me and he screams at me. He said, "I love seeing prayer. We need so much of your spiritual energy in the world." And he's like, "Keep it up." And it's so cool because this is like, he obviously has an important job. And it's so nice that, I'm trying to almost, not put myself in his way or anything. And he runs my way to say, "Thank you so much for your prayers. We need it in the world." It was just cool. Like last thing I would think is a guy driving a garbage truck is going to run to me and say, "Your prayers are so powerful." So it was just a cool thing. So over here, it's the opposite. Over here, it's someone yelling your way and trying to distract you and trying to knock you off, not necessarily hurt you, but just to spiritually distract you. It calls it a nasty heathen, someone who's specifically trying to just derail you in your spiritual growth, right? That's the expression. Nasty heathen. It's a pretty heavy expression. I like it. All right, let's see. In Hebrew, it's an Arel Rasha. A Rasha is that wicked person, but we're talking about like a sneaky guy over here. All right, let's see. I'm in the second paragraph at the top. And a nasty heathen stands next to him and tries to distract him by talking and mouthing off at him. So what should you do when you have this guy trying to distract you? In this case, the best thing to do is definitely not to respond to the antagonist, neither positively nor negatively. That you see, that's in quotes. It's actually mitov ad ra. It's an expression from Jacob in Genesis. Jacob says, "I didn't do it from mitov ad ra." But to act like a deaf man who does not hear, totally ignore this guy, which is also a quote from King David. To fulfill the verse, do not answer a fool by his folly, lest you too become like him. That's from Proverbs. It's pretty cool. In this paragraph, we just quoted 3 different verses from different places across Tanakh. But this last verse is just a beautiful one from Solomon, from Proverbs. In Hebrew, it's called Mishlei. Don't answer a fool because you may fall to his level. I like that. Don't answer a fool because you too may be like him. What is it Warren Buffett that says in business, I think he says, take the high road. It's less crowded, like always take the high road or something. He says an expression like that. So anyway, some things don't deserve the dignity of a response. Your inappropriate thought is just the klipa in your heart trying to tease and taunt you when you are doing a nice job at devotional prayer. It's just a mental hooligan. That is best ignored. Awesome. So let's just pause here for a second. It's a beautiful idea that's really coming to light, right? We're learning chapter after chapter 26, talking about worries and anxiety and depression that comes from the mundane concerns, livelihood, health, family issues, etc. We learned then about guilt coming from past misdeeds. Then we learned about shame coming from feelings that you're on your couch and you have this urge, you have this intense desire or fantasy that's inappropriate. And when it makes you feel bad that, look at me, I'm a nobody. Look at the thoughts that I'm going on. I'm so two-faced. So we dealt with all of that. Now we're talking about the concern we have that when you're in prayer, you're in a time of spiritual ecstasy. And even then, you're stuck in the rut. You're trying to have a nice thought, a nice meditation, think about God, think about what's right. And in that time, it creeps up all these inappropriate things. So he's saying here, look at it like a nasty person that's coming your way with the intention of just to distract you, just to throw you off. What do? Don't answer. He doesn't deserve your time. Ignore him. Put your talus a little higher over your eyes so you can't even see him, and just keep going. Just do your thing. That's because the whole point of that guy is just trying to distract you. He's just trying to knock you off. So look at that urge inside of you, that animal soul, that drive that's trying to throw a wrench, an inappropriate thought your way. It's the same thing. It's just someone with the exclusive intention of trying to distract you. They don't deserve your time. Throw it out. So it's a different mechanism than before. If you remember, before we were learning, when you have these feelings of shame, not always is it so terrible. It just has to be at the right place at the right time. When I'm buying apples in the supermarket, it's not a time for me to feel a sense of teshuvah and a sense of guilt over what I did. Dedicate a time, Thursday nights, or whenever you feel like you could carve out a half an hour and meditate on things that you feel need to be corrected, flaws that you have. But don't think of it in the middle of the day. But now we're saying during prayer, you should know that doesn't deserve any of your time. Not now, not later. Throw this out. It's just an evil intention of the animal soul that's feeling down, feeling weakened, and feeling it needs to put up the fight, and therefore it's going to try to throw it back. But don't give it any attention. Okay, cool. So let's see. I always take the high road. It's far less crowded. Thank you. Thank you, Shira. Okay, so let's reshare the screen. Any questions before we continue? Okay. Any feedback? Anyone has thoughts on this?
Something's been going around in my mind, Rabbi, when you describe the Persian garbage man.
Yeah.
He was not an evil person, as far as I can tell. He was
not at all. I was so touched. I was saying the contrary. I was saying that it was so nice to have someone encourage you in your prayer.
So did you ignore him, like the Tanya says, or not?
No, not at all. I was so nice to him. I said, thank you so much. We all need the prayers. It was no, on the contrary. My daughter was with me. It was a lovely time, and it's nice because I try to make sure my car is not parked, not blocking any of the things, and in case it is, I right away run into the car and move it. But he was just so nice. He was like, we had a wonderful conversation. Yeah. What's tricky sometimes, Barbara, actually is, it depends where I'm up to in prayer. Because there's halacha, right? There's Jewish laws that between the blessing of Baruch She'amar, which is maybe 5 minutes into prayer, until after the Amida, which is depending on the pace, but somewhere around 10, 15 minutes later, we don't talk. So, Nancy, I don't know if you remember, like we were talking recently of, after Adasa washes her hands for bread, she won't talk. And if people are trying to have a conversation, it may seem rude that the person is not responding, but really it's just because, we're in the middle of a mitzvah. So it's tricky. There are times when we could pause and talk during prayer, like after the Amida or earlier in the prayer. But the middle section, where it's sandwiched from the Baruch She'amar through the Amida, we try not to talk. So that's actually, so thank God he actually came to me during that time. So I was able to talk and it was fine. But there are other people that, they say good morning and I just give a big smile and a wave because I can't respond and I don't want to offend them. So I try to be as careful or cognizant as I can. But in Jewish law, it says you only interrupt if it's a non-Jewish king that by not answering, he could have your head for that. So, that's the intent, the level of not interrupting. So it's pretty intense, I guess. You have to. Thank
you, Rabbi. I was wondering about that and how you dealt with it.
Right. Okay. Well, so thank God he came at a time that I was able to talk. If he came at a time when I couldn't talk, I probably would have either given the thumbs up and said with a big smile, like some way of communicating how much I appreciate his words. And hopefully by the next week, when I see him again, the next round, I would wait until he comes and try to respond before I get to that point or something. But yeah, it definitely always keeps you on your toes. Okay. What about Shalom Bayit during prayer? Ooh, Shira, that's a good one. Anyone have an answer? Shira asks the great Ron, if you have any input on that. What if it's Shalom Bayit is your spouse asks you a question and you're in the middle of prayer? Do you put God first? Do you put your wife first? Is one, is it a contradiction? So Shira says you can interrupt. Are you saying that from the source or are you just saying that's you think what is more important? Oh, that's a source, really? Okay, I would love to know the source. Show me the source.
Hug is always good.
Emailing the source to my wife directly, that'll make it even easier for all of us. Okay, if you could either share the source now or email it to me later, but I would say actually we don't interrupt. You just every situation is different, but Adina knows that when I'm in the middle of prayer, she won't interrupt me. And sometimes she doesn't realize I'm in prayer and she would. And if I don't respond, she knows I'm in the middle of prayer. That's the only time I wouldn't respond. And then I'll come to her right after. But I guess we're in a rhythm now where when she's in prayer and I ask her a question, she won't answer, but it's not meant at all in any offensive way. So thank God that's where we're holding. But of course, if someone's more at an initial stage in their service where their spouse is not so used to their prayers and familiar with the ideas and would get offended, then I would probably say best is to pause and talk. But if you're both on the same page and they're not going to look at you not responding as putting God before them, and they would understand that you're in the middle of prayer and you're going to come to them right after, then I would think it's okay not to answer. But again, not as a general blanket statement, depending on the relationship, depending on the sensitivity of their religious growth. If the one spouse is higher than the other and the other spouse feels almost that you're putting them second, then perhaps it's better to pause. But if you're both on the same spiritual path and respect each other's methods of prayer, then I think it would be okay to not respond during that time. We're being recorded, so I don't know, maybe this will go viral and I'll get a lot of tomatoes thrown at my Zoom screen. But for now, we'll leave it at that. Tanya told someone that his wife interrupts him. It's okay. Maybe I didn't. Yeah, so it depends. Every situation is different. I don't remember exactly who we are referring to, but if they were more at an initial stage in their service, in their prayer, I would say it's more important to speak to your spouse and then pray after that. But depending on the situation, I'm talking about, like I say, personally, where we are holding, and some of you are like just seeing on the screen, some of you are more advanced in your prayers and regimen of daily prayer where your spouse respects it. So that would be different than if you're just starting off. And like I think I shared this joke before, but Jacob, our patriarch, it says each one of our three patriarchs instituted another one of the three prayers. It says Abraham, it says in the verse, Vayashkim Avram Baboker. When it came to the Akedah, the Torah uses the words that Abraham arose early in the morning. So we learn from there, what did he arose early? He instituted the early morning prayer. It says Jacob went into the field to speak in the late afternoon. Steve, it's your favorite words. Le'etz Erev, right? I think that's your favorite part of favorite words in the Torah, one of your favorite words. It says that Yitzchak, Isaac, went into the field in the late afternoon. So we learn from there, he developed the Mincha prayer, which is said in the late afternoon. And Yaakov, I forgot what the verse is about Yaakov, but he developed the evening prayer. So the joke that all the Rebbitzins, all the women share is, of course, Jacob wanted to run to synagogue for the evening prayer because that's when he had like 12 little boys at home. That's when it was bath time, diaper changing, pajama time, bedtime stories. So of course he's going to come up with a good excuse and say, I'm sorry, honey, I've got services, I got to run. So, so if someone's using that as their excuse, I can't talk to you because I'm in the middle of prayer. Of course, they have a lot more they have to be working on. But we're talking about when it's more in a healthy place. All right, that's enough of a marriage class, and let's get back to Tanya. Where were we? Okay. So I think we're at the bottom of the Kindle, last two paragraphs. So you don't react in any way to an inappropriate thought during prayer with any internal counter argument or dialogue. Listen to this expression. For in wrestling with a filthy person, you become filthy too. I love this expression. If you want to like for me, it's an expression, I don't know if it's rooted in the Tanya or it's a source from before. Let's just see the paragraph that follows and then we'll give our own little understanding of that. If you would hang around disgusting and immoral people, their influence would eventually rub off on you. So don't hang around with your negative thoughts either. I love that. Don't let them get it under your skin. If you entertain them for more than a moment, they will start to corrupt you. So the fact is, when you wrestle with another person, you get dirty, even if the other person is the one on the floor. But there's dust that arises that attaches to you. So the Hebrew expression is hamisnavel imenuvel. If you are getting down and dirty with a disgusting person, it's gonna rub off on you. And there's obviously so many meanings to this. Like one of the famous explanations of this is you have to, when you're choosing a community to live in, you have to make sure you're choosing a moral and upright community. Because the worry is, if you're living around immoral people, you could say, look at me, I'm so much better than them. So you almost feel I don't have to grow because I'm doing so much better than everyone else. That's what happened with Lot. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. He couldn't stand being around Abraham and the righteous influence that it was. So he went to Sodom, or Sodom, I think is the English pronunciation of it. And what did he do there? He felt like the most righteous person. And he actually wasn't that righteous, but he felt the most righteous around the people. So the fact is, when you're around an immoral setting, some of it rubs off on you, even if it's not purposeful. That's what happens. When you're around people that use foul language, you're not going to necessarily use them, but it's just something you have to be very mindful of. Not always could you avoid it. Sometimes you have to be in a certain office setting. There's actually someone in our community who they couldn't stand before COVID. They would always complain that the setting in their office was just toxic. It was very bad. And they would come home feeling tense and feeling like it was just not healthy for them. So while obviously COVID is like the worst thing, for them, they felt, now I could be home and I'm around a loving spouse and I don't have to be in a she's still working, but not involved in a toxic environment. So of course, every situation is different. And I'm getting derailed again over here. But the point that the Alter Rebbe, let's just get back to the point here. The Alter Rebbe is trying to say, don't use those thoughts and try to wrestle with them. Try to work through them. It's not your job. What's going to happen is those thoughts are going to come more part of you, and you're going to end up allowing them in. And those influences, if they hang around, and eventually they could get under your skin, they will start to corrupt you if you entertain it even for a little bit. And that's something I find to be a very powerful idea. Just always for us to be mindful of our settings, and specifically in this chapter of Tanya, mindful of our thoughts. Eventually, those thoughts could corrupt you. So don't entertain those thoughts. Don't try to act righteous and say, I'm going to work on them. I'm going to elevate them. That's a tzaddik. It's not your job. Number one, we learned that last week. And this week, what we're saying further is drop it. It's not good for you to be around these thoughts, just like it's not good for you to pray around the heathen. What would you do? You would ignore him. So ignore these thoughts also, because that's all it's trying to do is to derail you. Okay, back inside. So we're on the last paragraph before I think the final section. Oh, we're almost done the chapter. Perfect. Okay, good. Just act as if you were unaware of the inappropriate thoughts that popped into your head and you didn't hear them. Wipe them from your mind and intensify your powers of concentration. So some of you are familiar with, okay, yeah, let's just stop there. Let's try to finish the chapter first and we'll carry on some discussions. Section 3, when all else fails. Of course, that is easier said than done. What do you do if inappropriate thoughts keep coming back again and again? You can't stop them. We all know that the animal soul is part of us. So the thoughts are there in your feeling and your mind, and it's keeping on popping up. So the final section of Tanya of this chapter says like this: but if you find it hard to wipe inappropriate thoughts from your mind because they intrude on your mind with great force, then humble yourself before God and implore him in your mind. There is no need to interrupt your words of prayer. Just implore God in your mind, right? Because like we were saying before, we don't use words that are not the liturgy of the prayers during certain sections, but you could think of it. Interesting. Actually, Barbara, this brings up, I love what you said last week, Barbara, about, stopping and saying the Shema. It's just interesting over here. He's saying, think the Shema, but there's no need to interrupt your words of prayer. Just implore God in your mind. So let's see further. I'm not clarifying one way or another here. Let's see. Implore him to have pity on you, great pity, like the pity of a father on his children, who are derived from his brain, manifest in his seed. Implore God to have the same pity on your divine soul, which is derived from him, to save your soul from the raging waters. Let me turn the page. Of your turbulent mind, which is constantly disturbed by the animal soul. Implore him to do it not because of your merit, but for his own sake. For his people are literally part of God. Okay, so we'll have to pause. I would love anyone's feedback on how to explain this section of the Tanya. So the main part of the chapter is saying, ignore it, drop it. It's not your place to elevate it. It's not your place to work through it. It's just a distraction, and that's all it is. Your job is to drop it and carry on your prayers. What if you can't? What if they're just creeping up and totally flooding your mind to the point that you can't think of anything else other than it? Then you should actually implore God to help you. Pray to God to show mercy. And when we're feeling these raging waters and your turbulent mind that is constantly being flooded with animal soul, say, God, this is for your own merits, for your own sake. What's interesting, we actually use a lot of these words in our liturgy in the Hebrew, especially around high holiday time. We say one of the Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. We say, do it for your own sake, not for us. Meaning we're not worthy of it. God, lemancha aseh, do it for you, because we are your children, and we come from you. Like we learned in chapter 2, and he quotes it here. Just like the seed of a father comes from his mind, so too also we are coming from the mind of God. We're coming from God's wisdom. Deepest parts is where our soul comes from. So therefore, as a child to a father, pray to God, pray to your father, and say, have rahmanis, have mercy, have compassion, have pity on us, and save us from these turbulent waters. A lot to unpack in this idea, the idea of praying to God and say, God, help me. There's a cool letter of the Rebbe there was yeshiva boys who complained to the Rebbe about their teachers. They said that there's dysfunction in the leadership of the school. The principal and the teachers, this was back in the 60s. They complained to the Rebbe that they're not happy with their teachers. Like all the students got together and wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, one of the parts of the response is, the Rebbe said, pray for them. Pray that they get it all together. Like, of course, we have to do whatever we can, but don't forget prayer. Open up a Tehillim, a chapter, a book of Psalms, and start praying for them. So over here also, like during your prayer, these things are coming up. Take a moment and say, and have a conversation with God, a conversation from your own heart, and say, God, help me. Have pity on me. Don't do this to me. I'm trying to connect with you. Don't let these things push me over. Does anyone have any feedback on this one way or another? I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on how they understand this.
I do, Rabbi.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about how to go about prayer. There's some sects of Judaism, some Orthodox groups that you see them pray. It's almost like a wrecking train. They just go right through. They don't pause at any points. They just pray very, very quickly. And people that have come to my services, I could rattle the words pretty quickly, but I'm talking about like, there's almost no heart in their prayer. They just go right through it. And it's express. And there's Hasidim that, and if you go to 770, maybe not now because of COVID, but on a typical day in 770, especially on Shabbos in Crown Heights in the Chabad headquarters, you'll see young and old men and women on their sections that are fully engrossed and immersed in their prayer. Sometimes they pray for like their shacharit on Shabbat ends at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like just from the devotion, the focus. And there was like an argument, like of different groups saying, laughing at them that you're taking so slow, laughing at them that you're going so fast. So it's almost like they went to their Rebbe. This is like going back 150 years. I forgot which Rebbe it was. And they said, like, which one is correct? Should we go slow? Should we go fast? And each one had a good logic. The logic of going fast is because there's inappropriate thoughts. The fact is, like we discussed last week, Nancy, and we had this discussion in our class in Tanya last week, that when you're trying to clear your mind of other things and you're trying to focus on your prayer, what happens is other thoughts are going to come in also. So some theories are that you should just go through prayer quickly, so it doesn't allow those thoughts to even have time to settle in, because your mind is just going through the prayer, so it doesn't have time to clear itself for anything else to enter. So that's an opinion of some of these groups of why they go express. So they went to their Rebbe and they said, should we go fast? Should we go slow? So the Rebbe gave an example of a wagon that's going through a dangerous forest, with a person on there that's going on a business trip, and it's in the middle of the night. And in the olden days, they would travel for days and days, and there were some forests that were very dangerous to go through. So there's two methods of how to go through the forest. One is to go through the forest very quickly. And the goal is that even if there is a bandit, if there's a thief laying in ambush, he won't have time to get on, because if you're going so fast, he can't jump on the wagon. But the problem is that if he gets on, if he manages to get on, it's going to be much harder to get him off because he's on already. The other theory is to go slow. So if he's going to jump on, you're ready because you're able to stand up and you have the balance because the wagon's going slow, and you're able to wrestle him as soon as he gets on and throw him off. And that way he's not going to be able to jump back on because you threw him off and you're keeping on moving. So the idea of going slow or faster in prayer is almost like this combination of if I go fast, it's to not allow the inappropriate thoughts to come on. So, or to go fast or to go slow is if they're going to come in, you're going to be able to work through them. If I understand from this last section, it's almost saying, take a time, pause, and implore God. Use your own words to say, God, like, I need help over here. I need to carry on in my prayer, and I can't do it alone. And therefore, help me. It's almost like imploring God to help you in your fight. So, the idea of multitasking, it's almost like it's part of the prayer time. Actually, in Zohar, in the Kabbalistic books, it actually says the Aramaic word is shas slosa, shas karva. The time of prayer is a time of war. It's a time that we're at war with the klipa side, the negative energy, the drive for inappropriate thoughts that needs to be worked on. So it's be prepared for the battle. In terms of speed prayer, I thought if you pray, the divine soul wins over the animal soul, Hashem prevails in the wrestling match. I think we learned that Hashem helps you, right? That Hashem is there to help you. Did we learn that last week? I think we learned that, right? Or is it? Yeah. I think that's in line with what we're saying here, right? Implore God to stand by your side, to strengthen you during this craziness. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Oh, Yaakov, you're muted. I see you trying to talk.